So we're looking at 10 years of President Abbas. Could you take us through the main phases of his time in office and perhaps also where his strengths were and where his weaknesses were during this time?
It is not a question of history. It's not a question of documents. It's not a question of what has been done, what has not been done. It's a question of 10 years in one man's life and its implication on his people. He went through 5 phases in this 10 years. The first phase was Oslo, 1993, which was supposed to end in 1999. Unfortunately, it did not work. It was not meant to be implemented in the first place, according to the Israeli sources. That was the phase, which means two-state solution, recognition, transitional phase, autonomy as a beginning towards a statehood. The second phase, which turned to be, he was a little bit isolated, away from the scene, waiting for his role, unexpected role. He never wanted it, he never dreamt of it, he never wanted it at all. But it came to be there, which was, whether we like it or not, the roadmap 2003, the West, Americans, European, imposed on the Palestinians to create a position of a prime minister. He accepted it reluctantly, believing in the negotiation process, and he accepted the two-state solution based on the roadmap, which Sharon himself accepted it, and he started official direct meeting with Sharon in his office in Jerusalem, in Aqaba with President Bush and King of Jordan. The roadmap did not last 100 days. It was so many difficulties to face the man, he was forced to resign. That was a real setback in his culture, political culture in governing the Palestinian society. The third phase, post-Arafat era, the death of Arafat in 2004, the assassination of Sheikh Ahmed Yassin in Gaza, and he was forced to push in the seat of really governing. He was elected officially by the people in 2005 as president of the PA, president of the PLO. From that point, it took him a while to cope with the realities of the internal and external politics. Post-Arafat era. He's not a maestro of tactics like Arafat, he's not a hero, he's not a liberator, he's not a fighter. He's a simple man, technocrat, believing in negotiation, in non-violent resistance, and he wanted to establish a statehood. So he went through a phase with Salam Fayyad, 5 years state building policy, from 2005 to 2010, state building. The West were thrilled with the idea of ending corruption, cleaning the Palestinian house, building institution, and the process of negotiation. The other phase, which is serious, he accepted the responsibility and the duty to represent the Palestinian people in a historical moment for a long, painful process of negotiations. He negotiated with all Israelis, Sharon, Olmert, Livni, Netanyahu, and many ministers of defense, and overcome many internal problems, trying to clean his house. Unfortunately, Israeli kept him in the prison culture, maintained, controlled him and his people in the prison culture, which meant water, electricity, sewage, education, health, and stayed in, contained by the Israelis, and carried on their business on settlement and the war, which tended to be like a sharp knife cutting our flesh, in spite of the international court condemning it and demanding of dismantlement. Now he is entering a new phase since 2012, internationalization of the Palestinian question. He's trying to challenge Washington and the West, including the Israelis. It's time to end occupation. It's time to give me a timetable to end occupation. It's time to condemn Israeli policy and practices. So you can read the man in different phases for different chapters, reflecting on governing the Palestinian society and trying to deliver his legacy. His legacy is a statehood. That's why he's focusing today, I am the man who brought you the recognition of 138 states. I am the man who challenging Washington and Tel Aviv for ending occupation.
To bring it to perhaps the internal politics, Hamas, Fatah, do you think he did enough? Do you think he was capable? Do you think that, how do we look at him in that role about what happened, this split, this divide, and was it hindrance? The internal divisions, Hamas, Fatah, could he have done more? Were his hands tied? How do we see him in this split, and how has it affected his time? in office?
The question is not the division between Fatah and Hamas. The question in 10 years, what President Abbas has been trying to do. First of all, on his own house, in Fatah faction, he managed to take a serious historical decision by pushing out of the house 3 activists, like Kaddoumi, like Ahmed Qray', and like Dahlan. Not only in personal levels, but he succeeded in putting them out of the house. 2, he was the first to convene the Fatah Convention in Bethlehem, trying to bring a new blood, a new generation. But they tend to be not partners, not fighters, but followers and employees, which kept Fatah weak. And that's why Fatah lost in their election in 2006. Then we moved to the challenge. He accepted democracy. He appointed Ismail Haniyeh as a prime minister. He wanted to deal directly with Hamas, yet the split was very clear. First of all, within Fatah movement, reflected on Hamas, not only on the vision, but on the mission. The mission is two-state solution, which everybody agrees, but how to reach it. Resistance, negotiation, non-violence, and the game was really misplayed by personalities. They personalized the battles and they did not look on Palestine first. And that was a defeat in the national movement. Now, the second thing, which he lost Gaza. If it was Yasser Arafat, within minutes he could fly to Gaza, he would travel to Gaza, he would go to Gaza, embrace everybody, and paid everybody, and appointed everybody, and close the gap. Abbas wouldn't do this. This is not his personality, this is not his character, and he was too much influenced by many internal and external factors to keep it split. And that's why the separation went on and on and on.
Looking at which was initially his strategy of negotiations, right? This is the way he was going to achieve his state. We've seen the negotiations ongoing. Never anything was achieved. In fact, settlements were expanded from this Israeli government. Certainly the narrative was always they wouldn't budge on Jerusalem. All this narrative that certainly when you translate it to the street, people weren't happy. Why are you talking when we're getting nothing? In fact, the geography is changing to our detriment. Do you think he spoke for too long? Do you think he should have internationalized things quicker? How do you assess the way he played this?
It's too complicated and too difficult to judge the negotiation process because each phase has different prime minister, different agenda in Israel. Yet, by the end of the day, Mr. Abbas was very much aware of the Israeli agenda. That's why he wanted to expose it to the world. He was the first to meet Sharon directly in his office. He was the first to accept Sharon's thesis in Sharm el-Sheikh meeting for security coordination, for control on the West Bank, and carried on the business as usual, not necessarily as subcontractor for the occupiers, but to contain law and order in his own community, waiting for Washington or Brussels or London or Paris or even Berlin to move in and assist. Their assistance was limited to financial expenses, salaries and ranks. The other thing, he depended basically on Washington to have a pressure on Israel, and without realizing Washington will never ever do that.
How would you look at, for a wider audience, looking at 10 years of Abbas in terms of his character, in terms of his achievements, where would you say his strengths and weaknesses lie during his time?
Well, you need a psychologist, a psychiatrist to judge people's personality and their character, but he's well known as committed to what he believes in. He's well known as stubborn in his position. He's well known as if he disagrees with you, you are out of the house completely. He will not accept today, especially today, other opinion, other people to share decision making, or other people to direct his line of thinking or work.
Yeah, what do you think would be his legacy, what he would be well remembered for, I suppose, at the moment or going forward, the challenges going forward for him?
There are 4 basic issues related to the 10 years of Mr. Abbas in office. The first issue, definitely the question of Jerusalem. Israeli atrocities, Israeli attacks, Israeli incursion to Al-Aqsa Mosque, and his complete support to the idea that the Hashemite are the custodianship on the holy site, and could not have a real say, a presence in Jerusalem issues. 9 Palestinian institutions are closed, PLO is not allowed to function, the PA is limited, the destruction of houses. Policies and practices in Judaizing Israelization of the city of Jerusalem is a big burden, and he could not challenge it enough. The second one definitely is the disengagement and the separation, and the Gaza is out of the consensus in the Palestinian House. Thirdly is the weakness of Fatah today. Fatah tend to be now followers and employees, and ranks and salaries are not really freedom fighters. Today we remember 50 years of Fatah establishment as a national revolution representing the cause of Palestine, yet there is no agenda, there is no consensus, and there is no leaders among Fatah today, and not any place. And finally, on the negotiation process, he put all his eggs in Washington basket, expecting Washington to deliver. He met all American officials on all levels, and yet Washington was too short to meet his expectation.
Finally, on joining the International Criminal Court, how significant is that, and what is he trying to achieve with it?
Well, basically, since 2012 is the idea of internationalization, the question of Palestine, in terms of land and people and aspiration and self-determination. We have a huge volume of United Nations resolutions supporting the Palestinian question, never been translated to reality. It's left on the shelves and just lip service. Today, the man is trying to tell the international community, it is your responsibility. The core conflict in the Middle East, in the whole Arab world today, is Palestine, whether you accept it or not. Now the Islamophobia, the Islamization of the Arab capitals, the challenges of faith and politics is based on Jerusalem and Palestine. It's time to wake up and to realize it has to end today. Otherwise, we are facing the reality. It's an apartheid state in the making. Different regimes and systems governing us and the Israelis.
Doctor, you seem to be more critical of
There is no love and hate relationship. It's business-like relationship. It's not Arafat era. Abbas system is a business-like relationship. What's for me, what's for you, where we meet, where we differ, and what is the balance?
Right. Do you think? Are you impressed with this? Are you impressed with how he has, carried out his office?
Well, the general consensus among Palestinian society, everybody is very much disappointed with the 10 years Abbas in office, because the ceiling of our aspiration is coming low. Well, the challenges facing him and us were immense by the Israelis on all levels, in terms of land, in terms of housing, in terms of living conditions, in terms of movement. And the tools of resistance were limited, containing the Palestinians even in marches and demonstration. Freedom of speech is not there at all in the first place. So we are from a bigger prison to a smaller prison, and people go for self-censorship today in order just to carry on business as usual. Survival is today's agenda. If you ask anybody, what's your aspiration? He will tell you survival. Not necessarily maintaining the status quo, but not coming down of the status quo.
And finally, sorry, the question about the people, the Palestinian people, how do they see him in your eyes?
It differs between a group. 10 years of Abbas in office, he created a Nobelish society, millionaires from Fatah and business community. Ramallah is becoming a small Beirut, restaurant, coffee shop, and media and theater and diplomatic mission, as if we are living in a different world. While Nablus and Jenin and Ramallah and Gaza are in a real refugees culture, depressed, isolated, poverty, unemployment. And now people are struggling and fighting for their own salaries. 7 months without a salary. How can you manage? How can you live on rent and loans and assistance? And we are very much divided. There is no consensus among Palestinians today. There is no national movement as before. People don't speak about Palestine. They speak about Nablus, Hebron, Jenin, Gaza, cities and towns, and limiting your agenda to your own skin today just to survive.
Is that his fault?
Well, the challenges is among today the youth, the young generation who represent more than 60% of our society are the future, who are maintaining their culture, their identity, and they're working for their own narrative, and they are not resigning, and they are not emigrating, and they are steadfast here and hope in the future to challenge all these odds among Israelis. Because the agenda of today is Israel-Palestine. It's not Palestinians as people assume.
Okay, thank you.